All right, good morning. Good morning, everyone. If you could take your seats, we'll get started. Did everybody have a good morning? Yes? That was kind of tepid. Were the workshops good? Yes? And last night, did anyone get rained on? Yes. Sorry. It's going to be better this afternoon and tomorrow. Well, we're very honored today, if I could get your attention. We're honored today to have with us Chairman Lacy Clay. Representative Clay is the chairman of the House Financial Services Subcommittee on Housing, Community Development, and Insurance. That is, of course, the subcommittee that is responsible for the HUD programs, including the Homeless Assistance Program, so very important to all of us. In his leadership role, he has been a staunch advocate, not only for solutions to homelessness, but also for fair housing and against the redlining of minority neighborhoods by banks, insurance companies, and appraisers. And that, of course, has resulted in displacement and entire sections of American cities being disinvested and abandoned. So we appreciate so much his leadership on that. He is also a leader on issues of climate change, renewable energy, and safe water. Mr. Clay is a senior member of the Oversight and Reform Committee, which has been a busy committee these days. It has major investigative responsibilities for the operations of the federal government. Mr. Clay is a native of St. Louis and a graduate of the University of Maryland. He's currently serving his 10th term in the U.S. House of Representatives, having first been elected in 2000. And prior to that, he served 17 years in the Missouri State Legislature. Please join me in welcoming Congressman William Lacy Clay.
Thank you so much, Nan, and let me say good morning and welcome back to Washington. I want to thank your President and CEO, Nan Roman, and Board Chairman Jeffrey Hayward for inviting me to be here as you kick off this impressive conference. And we're looking forward to seeing all of you this week on the Hill. And as mentioned, I'm the new chairman of the House Subcommittee on Housing, Community Development, and Insurance. And along with my good friend, Chairwoman Maxine Waters. We are going to illuminate, educate, and advocate to fight homelessness like never before. And in our subcommittee, we will hold hearings and pass the Fair Chance at Housing Act introduced by Senator Kamala Harris and Representative Ocasio-Cortez. Now, that legislation changes eviction and screening policies in housing so people with a criminal history can apply for federal housing assistance. It's the right thing to do, and it prevents homelessness. And you know, in Congress, we like to hold hearings about vital issues like this. So let me tell you what I've learned so far about your critical mission. Homelessness is not unsolvable. It's a misguided choice that we have made as a nation. And the fact that this great nation still has a substantial homeless population is not just tragic, it's a national disgrace. We should all be ashamed that in every city and town our fellow Americans live on the streets without shelter, without proper nutrition, without proper medical care, and without hope. That's not right, and we need to demand an end to this national tragedy. On any given night, across my congressional district in St. Louis, approximately 1,500 people are homeless. Some are in shelters, some are on the streets, and some just fall through the cracks. Sadly, that story is repeated in communities all across this country. But our best estimate, provided by HUD's annual point-in-time count, on any given night across this nation, over 552,000 Americans are homeless. 67% of them are single individuals. 33% are families with children, and most shamefully, 1/3 of America's homeless population are veterans. From what I've seen, the only way out of this is to fight, to make affordable housing for low and moderate income people a national priority again. And I need you to help me win that fight. We are facing the gravest shortage of affordable housing in our nation's history. Today, almost 8 million low-income households pay at least half their monthly income for housing. That's not sustainable. That creates housing instability and ultimately creates homelessness. So the solution is obvious: more housing that low-income families can afford. Across this country, in both urban and rural areas, there is simply not enough affordable housing stock. Some of that can be directly attributed to destructive federal housing policies from the past that encourage redlining and discourage home ownership for African Americans and other minorities. In my subcommittee, we are taking on the insidious and racist policy of redlining in minority neighborhoods. For far too long, banks, insurance companies, and appraisers have been allowed to write off entire sections of American cities and the good people who live there as disposable. That's racist, that's wrong, and it needs to end. And you know, some of the affordable housing shortage is also a direct hangover from the Great Recession, which decimated low-income neighborhoods who suffered terrible damage from the triple punch of redlining, subprime loans, and a tsunami of foreclosures. And if we're going to be honest with ourselves as a nation, we have never really gotten serious about treating the root causes of homelessness by adequately supporting community-based services to address substance abuse, mental health care, employment training, disabilities, and access to basic health care. And you know, while local efforts matter a great deal, the federal government is essential, and we should be leading this effort in a much more powerful way. I continue to have frank and useful discussions with HUD Secretary Dr. Ben Carson. As I encourage, okay, I'm trying to keep a straight face here. Look now. And as I encourage him to support public housing and the Section 8 housing voucher program, regardless of what some people in this administration think, the U.S. government should not get out of the affordable housing business. You know, public housing is still needed, and voucher programs still provide decent and safe, affordable housing for low-income people. These programs prevent homelessness, and instead of looking for ways to abandon housing as a federal priority, we should be embracing affordable housing as a bipartisan imperative that is worth fighting for. But you know, today, because of a lack of federal funding, only 1 in 4 low-income households that are eligible for housing assistance ever receive it. HUD and this Congress have critical roles to play in changing that. And it turns out that most Americans want us to solve this problem too. In a recent national poll conducted by Hart Research Associates on behalf of the Opportunity Starts at Home campaign, the vast majority of Americans, 85%, believe that ensuring everyone has a safe, decent, affordable place to live should be a top national priority. And you know, and that view is bipartisan. Fully 80% of all respondents to the poll agreed that both the President and Congress should take major action to make housing more affordable for low-income households. And while some think of homelessness and housing insecurity as just an urban problem, this new poll shows that is just not true. In fact, Americans who live in cities, suburban residents, and Americans who live in small towns and rural areas say that housing affordability is a big problem for them also. So it turns out that ending homelessness and housing insecurity is not only the right thing to do for our country, it's good politics too. Even we can applaud that too. You know, even more shocking is the finding that 74% of low-income Americans told pollsters that they have cut back on healthy food, medicine, utilities, after-school activities, and other day-to-day necessities that most of us take for granted just to pay for housing. And as you might expect, African Americans and Hispanics are the most likely to have to make those painful sacrifices to keep a roof over their heads. Ladies and gentlemen, in the greatest nation on earth, we need to do better. We have the means. We have the means to prevent homelessness, but what we lack is the collective courage at the federal level to change this. And that's where you come in. First, I need you to ask your members of Congress to support a couple of other important bills that I've introduced in the Financial Services Committee. and one is H.R. 3620, the Strategy and Investment in Rural Housing Preservation Act, which would directly address the crisis of a lack of affordable housing in America, in rural America, and add $1 billion to that program. The other one is H.R. 3619, the Appraisal Reform Act of 2019, which would help expose and end the racist and discriminatory business practices that punish low-income families in urban areas, making housing unaffordable and denying them the American dream of home ownership. I'm absolutely sure that the time is now for both federal action to end homelessness. The public is ready to support us. Fully 90% of the American people believe that in the richest nation on earth, homelessness should not be allowed to remain as a national stain on our character. In my view, we need to greatly expand federal rental assistance through vouchers and tax credits. And we need to make major new federal investments in the National Housing Trust Fund to increase the supply of affordable housing for low-income Americans. And Congress should consider the creation of a National Housing Stabilization Fund, which would provide emergency financial assistance to ensure housing stability and prevent homelessness for low-income households that experience an unexpected hardship such as a job loss or medical crisis not covered by insurance. Ladies and gentlemen, no child in America should have to sleep in a car. No child. No senior citizen should have to skimp on their medication to pay the rent. No mother should have to skip meals to ensure that she can keep a roof over her family. And no veteran who has served this country should ever be reduced to sleeping in a box on a sidewalk. And I believe that the time for excuses is over. If Congress can pass a $2 trillion tax cut for corporations and the 1%, then we can surely step up to end the national tragedy of homelessness. And you know, the fight starts in your community. It then expands to your state legislature, and it comes here to Washington. And ultimately, it will be solved at the ballot box. I thank all of you who have stood by me and other progressives who continue the fight for affordable housing and economic justice. Let me say to you, have a great conference. May God bless you all, and thank you for what you do for this country. God bless you. Thank you. Love you. Love you.
All right. Well, we have our marching orders. Thank you so much to Chairman Clay. We're very fortunate to have him as our leader in the House and the Housing Subcommittee. We appreciate him being with us here today. It's now my pleasure to welcome Matthew Doherty, the Director of the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. The Alliance works very, very closely with USICH, as I know many of you do too, and have appreciated so much Matthew's incredible leadership, especially over the past couple of years. So thank you, Matthew.
Morning, everyone. I think Nan keeps giving me very, very hard acts to follow at these conferences, but it's always a great pleasure to be here. And I want to thank Nan and her team for another great conference. I am obligated to note right up front that my husband Dean did send me with an official request that the conference not always overlap with his birthday, which is today. So I'm going to submit that request to you later, Nan. But it's always an honor to be here and have a few minutes to speak with all of you. And it remains an incredible honor to continue to lead the amazing team at USICH, a team that just keeps getting stuff done and moving the work forward despite the many challenges and the many risks for distraction. So thank you very much to the team at USICH. I always think of these conferences, I apologize if I look down a lot, but the lights are really, really bright. I think of these conferences as touchstones that help us to assess where we are as a movement, to assess both our challenges and our progress. When I spoke here a couple of years ago, I talked about the core values that we were trying to hold true to at USICH. Values like staying true to the vision of ending homelessness. Values like focusing on evidence-based practices and housing first. And focusing on addressing racial disparities and the increased risks that LGBTQ people face. When I spoke here last year, I was proud to announce the release of the new federal plan, Home Together, a plan that we feel strongly holds true to those values. But as I prepared for today, I couldn't help but be aware that some of these values seem increasingly threatened. I'm not going to take time today to outline all of those challenges and threats. Nan's opening remarks yesterday did a great job of describing them. So if you've been paying attention, you know what they are. If you haven't been paying attention, please come find me afterwards. I'll be happy to catch you up. So instead, I want to use my time to be as clear as I can be about the core values and beliefs that I personally am bringing to this work right now. First, I firmly believe that to end homelessness, we must continue to embrace and to strengthen housing first practices and approaches. It is those practices that are driving progress, and it is those practices that make sure we are best addressing the needs of everyone who experiences homelessness in our country. I also firmly believe that we are not doing our work well if we're making any people feel unsafe or unwelcome in our programs, or if we're turning people away or removing them from housing or services or programs based upon their identities or based upon the composition of their families. I firmly believe that to end homelessness, we must hold true to the value that every person, every family is worthy of housing and is worthy of our support. I also firmly believe that we can bring diverse motivations and perspectives to our work. My motivation primarily comes from my belief in the importance of justice, but you may have different motivations. For some of you, it's probably a commitment to being of service. For others of you, it is faith or religious beliefs. For others, it's a vision of the communities or the country that you're trying to achieve and help build. For others, it may be something else. I'd ask you to pause a moment and think about whatever motivates you at the deepest levels to be in this work. My guess is that whatever it is, it's a long game proposition. It's not something that can be achieved overnight, and it's not something that can be destroyed overnight either. But I also expect that whatever motivates you most deeply also requires vigilance to protect. And as I think about the state of our movement right now, I firmly believe that vigilance is needed more than ever. But I also firmly believe that we can have many reasons to be confident in what we can achieve together. I see communities across the country that are still laser focused on ending homelessness. The efforts to end veteran homelessness, for example, have continued at a steady pace. In the first half of this year alone, 10 more communities have achieved the goal and effectively ended veteran homelessness in their communities. And they've done that by embracing housing first approaches. That brings us to a total of 79 communities to date. 10 communities so far this year, so with regrets, that's too many for me to mention you each by name. Some of your continuum of care names are very long, but they include communities in Illinois, in Missouri, in Kentucky, in Michigan, in Mississippi, in Texas, and Minnesota. So who is here from any of the places that have achieved the goal of ending veteran homelessness this year? So congratulations and thank you. I also draw confidence from the movement to end youth homelessness. Who is here from a community that is engaged in a 100-day challenge on youth homelessness? Right? Who is here from a community that is a youth homelessness demonstration program site? Great. These communities are embracing a model of change led by young people for young people who are leading a movement that is committed to leaving no one behind, not young people of color, not LGBTQ youth, not young people with disabilities, no one. I'm also confident because of the ways you continue to take the work of preventing and ending homelessness into new territories. I don't remember a time in my lifetime when housing affordability was higher on the nation's policy agenda, and Representative Clay spoke very powerfully about that. I don't remember a time when people, including elected officials, have better understood the connections between housing affordability and homelessness. So we need to seize this window of opportunity before it closes on us. I also draw confidence from the continued innovation within our sector, like the new emphasis on prevention and diversion, so that people won't have to experience the trauma of even one night of homelessness. Finally, I also take confidence from the work underway to deepen understanding and to start to take action on the intersections of homelessness and racial inequities and racism. We have so much more work to do in this area, but more communities are wrestling with how to dismantle the racist practices, systems, and policies that have created and that continue to sustain racial inequities. Racial inequities not just in housing, but in justice, in employment, and health, and throughout our country and throughout our culture. There are so many reasons to be confident, but I also want to caution that that confidence cannot distract us from the importance of our vigilance. So here's the last of my core beliefs that I'll mention today. We won't be able to stay on the best path for preventing and ending homelessness by being silent, or by assuming that, that other people have already been persuaded by the power of our case, or by expecting that other people will make the case for our work for us. I firmly believe that we must always be making the case for what's working and why, all the time, and to everyone who needs to understand. And while tweeting about it is good, it's really probably not enough. Your motivations for doing this work may be different than mine. Your core beliefs may be different than the ones that I just described. There are probably things that we disagree about. Why wouldn't there be? Why shouldn't there be? But all of your voices matter, and all of your expertise matters. So in closing, I'm asking you to recognize that the policy and the practice debates that are happening right now require you, as much as ever, to make your voices heard. Because I firmly believe that we will only end homelessness in our country through your voices and through your continued vigilance and through your urgent vigilance. So thank you for your time today, and thank you also for everything that you do every day. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Matthew and his team for everything they do every day, although I honestly can't believe he said that tweeting wasn't enough. I don't even know what a tweet is. So. Anyway, thank you, Matthew. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Chandra Crawford. Chandra is a program and policy analyst at the National Alliance to End Homelessness, and our colleague there, she also has been helping to lead our work on racial equity, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about that.
Okay. Oh, Nan, if ever there was a time to discuss racial equity, it would definitely be this week. So let's recap some of the things. That's a loud sigh. Okay, so let's recap some of the things that you've heard today, yesterday, and some of you throughout the conference. So let's talk about the racial dimensions of homelessness. And I'm going to be real quick on this, but I just want to put this discussion in context. So as many of you know, most minority groups in the U.S., they disproportionately represent people experiencing homelessness. So with the exception of, Asian populations. So the most striking disproportionality that we see is among African Americans, of course. And so you've heard this quite a bit. African Americans make up 13% of the population, but 40% of people experiencing homelessness, and 25% of people experiencing poverty. So I always like to include that percentage about poverty, and I tell you why. Because when you look at that percentage, you can see that the racial distributions across homelessness and people in poverty, that poverty alone cannot explain racial disparities because that's a much lower number. So the best way to demonstrate this, and I always like to use this stair example. So let's talk about the white population, right? So we have about 79% of whites making up the population. We have about 66% of whites living in poverty, and then 50% of whites experiencing homelessness. And usually when we say, climb the stairs, that's a good thing. Oh, not in this case. So remember those numbers I just told you, right? So we got African Americans at 13%, poverty 25%, homelessness 40%. That's going the wrong way. So we know we have some work to do here, right? And so let's be clear, because I want to recognize the field in your work. So we know that there's been some people out there doing excellent work, right? So at the national and the local level. So for example, we have the Center for Social Innovation in 2016. They launched Spark. Even that name, Spark, right, makes you want to know what type of information they're trying to kick out to you, right? So that really knocked down the door. I would kick out my leg if I didn't have a dress. But it really got us to start to think about, right, analyzing and responding to racial disparities. And we have HUD tearing it up too. We saw racial disparities being added to the NOFA, so now you receive points if you tackle that in the application, so we're really excited about that. But, even before then, and I'm going to tell a quick story. I don't have a lot of time, but I love stories. So anyway, when I first entered the field, I wanted to, go to New Orleans and help with the recovery after Katrina. And so obviously at that time, a lot of Hill and advocacy work was needed. So I said, oh yeah, that's me. And Unity said, that's fine. But before you do anything here, we're going to need you to write down some lines about your commitment to racial and social justice. So they were centered that way then. So that's what I said, but I started writing. So now let me talk to you a little bit about the Alliance. And so with racial equity being a major priority here, so the big question for us is so what can we do, as a national organization to contribute to the work? And so that's our big question. So what are things that we can do to help promote racial equity? So look, I'm going to borrow from LL Cool J for a second. You know that line, don't call this a comeback, don't call this an initiative. This is a commitment. This is who we are. So we take this very serious. We wear this. Thank you. So, so let me talk about some of the things that we've been up to. And I'm going to start with the conference because, well, we're at the conference. So obviously, as you know, a lot of people, they come to our conference because this is a good place to exchange ideas and to talk about best practices. And so, the same holds true for racial equity. So for the conference, we had, I want to say, a 5-part series, if you will, on racial equity. And so the topics, they stem from looking at your data, what to do if you find disparities, looking internally, looking at indigenous populations with the pre-con as a foundation. And so what I mean by the pre-con is we kind of focus on historical and structural racism and kind of talked about definitions like implicit bias. So it just really set off the workshops. So, but I want to say, here's another one of those moments. So I was talking to one of our speakers, my sister Colleen Echohawk, and she said, you know what, Sean, I think, hello, yes. And she said, I think this 5-part series is a really good idea. And I said, okay. But she said, but I also want you to know how important it is not to just talk about race in designated workshops, honey. That discussion should be throughout the entire conference. Right. So this is what I told her, and this is what I want you all to know, that we ask many of our speakers to integrate racial disparities into their presentations, so whether you see it in the title or not. And so what our goal is to make sure that racial equity has a standard place in varied discussions about ending homelessness. Now, we are committed to that, and you will continue to see that. So I just want to make sure that we know. So thank you, Colleen, for pointing that out, but we're working on it. So in a similar vein, we're also committed to having diverse panels. So we know, diversity in thought, varying opinions, now that's one thing. But diversity and representation, now that's another. And that's right. And so, your little colleague, they help you with a little applause just to thank you, Shalom. And so, and really, diversity and representation, that does broaden and make the conversations diverse. And so the two go together. And what's that word I'm looking for? Oh, inclusion. We are committed to that. And so you'll start to see more of that. And so the next thing in my notes, too, I just kind of want to talk about some of the partnerships and some of the partners that we've been working with, because obviously this is work that we can't do it alone. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is we kind of wanted to create a space where people in the field, we could exchange ideas and people could kind of advise the Alliance on some of the things that we should be looking at or our recommendations in this work. And so hence our formation of the Racial Equity Network. We call it the REN. We like acronyms around here. And so what that's made up is local and state systems leaders, advocates. And so let me say this, though, before I get more into that. So we know that the disproportionality that we see in the homeless system. So we understand the impact of historical and structural racism in feeder systems like the criminal justice system. But for the REN, what we try to focus on is the inequity in the homelessness system. So we want to make sure that, and we should be involved in those larger movements for sure, and we most certainly encourage people to do so, but we try to look at things that we know we can directly impact. And so the biggest thing is that we want to make sure that the homelessness system itself isn't perpetuating inequity. So that's really what we try to focus on. And so one of the things that we did do at the REN is, we support our partners. So as a first step, we encourage people to look at HUD's tool. They have a racial analysis tool for you all who may not be aware of, and that allows you to look at racial disparities across your COC. So just much so, like I pointed out, the poverty, so that tool, it allows you to look at the racial distributions across poverty, people experiencing homelessness, and people experiencing unsheltered homelessness, kind of like the same concept of the stairs that I just showed you. And then also, we created a tool, and that looks at oh, I didn't know if we put the tool up. I think it's on the app, but I had to check. So, okay, so just in case, I was going to say, okay, that's okay. You'll see it. You'll see it. And so what that tool does, it looks at whether the outcomes in your system or programs vary depending upon the race or ethnicity. So it really looks at simple data points. And so basically it looks at who's in your system, who gets what, and who returns. And I'll tell you why we kind of really wanted to make it simplistic, because I get asked all the time, we get asked all the time, where do we start? So I know there are a lot of people who are more advanced in this work, but then there are just quite frankly a lot of people who aren't. So hopefully, the tool can be useful. And so now when people say, oh, where do I start? Here you go. So we got a couple of things to offer them. So another thing that I want to point out is that, man, our research team is really, our research institute, they're really heavily involved in this work, and they've put out quite a few pieces of information. So they really look at demographics, and they've been really looking at racial disparities. And so please expect and look out for more informative research coming from them. And then, I just lastly really want to point out that we understand that this is a collective effort, and we really value partnerships. And so obviously working with our leadership council, we work with the National Racial Equity Network Group. In fact, they have a meeting this Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And so obviously, we meet to talk about how to include people with lived experience in this work. So again, I just want to emphasize that we realize this is something that we can't do alone, and we appreciate your support. And so in closing, I just want to tell you how much I really do appreciate your feedback, and I actually do hear from a lot of you about racial disparities. Like I said, a lot of it is, where can I start in this work? What should I do? And again, I just want to reiterate how firmly we are committed to working with our partners to continue to help create solutions, recommendations to end inequity. And then, again, I just want you to know how much we welcome your dialogue. Please feel free to reach out to me, even if you haven't started. I love to hear from you. So just feel comfortable in doing that. And so hopefully some of the work that I've pointed out during this discussion has been helpful, or you will find helpful to you. Again, feel free to come up to me at the conference. And I just want to say, to racial equity, thank you.
Well, I just want to thank Chandra for her leadership, both in the organization and nationally. And we're plugging away. Need your help and suggestions and thoughts, as she said. Thank you so much, Sean. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Azia Ruff and Phoebe Von Cleef, who are members of the National Youth Forum on Homelessness, who are going to make an exciting announcement after this brief video. Is that right? Yes.
We've seen the evidence. We've seen the evidence.
We've seen the evidence.
We've seen the evidence.
We've seen the evidence, and we know.
And we know that ending youth homelessness is possible.
That ending youth homelessness is
possible.
And know that ending youth homelessness is possible.
This is the beginning.
This is the beginning.
This is the beginning.
This is the beginning.
This is the beginning
Of the end to youth homelessness.
of the end of youth homelessness.
Of the NT.
Youth homelessness.
This is the beginning of the end of youth homelessness.
Hey y'all, good afternoon. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the plenary. Hi, my name's Aja. You might recognize me from that video with slightly shorter hair. Sup?
And I'm Phoebe Van Cleef, and we are part of the National Youth Forum on Homelessness.
Yeah, the forum's great. They do a lot of great work and engagement with young people with lived experiences of homelessness and housing instability. I'm not going to get into it now, but they're really awesome, and you should talk to somebody about it. So talk to somebody. But we're here on the stage right now because Phoebe and I are faculty for this thing called the Grand Challenge Initiative. And we're here actually to invite you to a reception where we'll be able to tell you more about all the good stuff that's coming. In our work to center youth collaboration, to emphasize continuous improvement and transformative equity in our fight to end youth homelessness.
So the Grand Challenge will support 10 communities to achieve one shared result: an effective end to youth homelessness for LGBTQ youth and youth of color within 2 years, setting a path to ending youth homelessness for all youth.
Yeah. That was worthy of the applause, so thank you for that. So the Grand Challenge, what is it? It's this thing, we like to call it like a problem-solving initiative that's grounded in 3 critical approaches, including youth collaboration, racial and LGBTQ equity, as well as continuous improvement. It builds on strategies which have already resulted in significant reductions in veteran and chronic homelessness throughout the United States. And another really important part of the Grand Challenges is that we have this unflinching focus and this dedicated partnership with the young people that are most impacted by youth and young adult homelessness, which are, again, young people of color and young people who identify on the LGBTQ spectrum.
Definitely. So the Grand Challenge is grounded in the theory that if we meet the needs of those young people that are most impacted by homelessness, which so happen to be youth of color and LGBTQ youth, that we create a better system for all people experiencing it. So that thought process is known as targeted universalism. So putting it another way, if I change the system for the most impacted, the entire system benefits.
All right. Do you see? Oh, there it is. So on the screen, right there, this beautiful visual, this is the Grand Challenge theory of change. And this is a visual representation of how we're going to integrate our process of continuous improvement using data with our core approaches and values. But you might be asking, okay, equity, okay, collaboration, what's actually different about this? For one thing, we are unapologetic in the need for radical change in the housing and homelessness system, as other people have talked about today and throughout this conference. So shouts out to all the great minds thinking alike. But another thing that's really special and different about these Grand Challenges is that we are centering youth experiences and leadership to guide and pave the way in this journey to end youth and young adult homelessness.
So join us tonight. The introduction to the Grand Challenge reception, to hear from the Grand Challenge faculty, and to find out how your community can become part of our big family. The application is open now. Go to the Way Home America website to see what that's about. Applications and community videos are due on August 20th.
All right. So before we close, we need you to join us. We're going to start a sentence, and our team here will hold up signs for you to complete it. Just, y'all see them?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
cool.
the cards.
So basically, we're going to say something, and then we're just going to read together what it says on the cards. Does that sound clear? Okay.
Are you ready? Yes. Are you ready? Yes. Let's do it.
All right. Now is the time to seize the momentum of the movement we have built to...
And now it's time to seize the momentum we've built in this movement to...
Yeah. Yeah.
Give yourselves a round of applause.
That was really good for a group call. That was like that was good. That was very good. Round of applause for yourself on that, because people, as many people in this room, that could have not been pretty, but that was gorgeous. So good job, y'all. All right. Now is the time to seize the momentum of the movement we have built to...
And last but not least, Now is the time, like no other time, to see you guys tonight.
All right, lots to do in the grand challenge. Okay, just a few announcements and then we'll get to lunch. A reminder first to change, there's been a change in the schedule. Steve mentioned this. If you take out your agenda at a glance, you can change it. I think it's already been changed on the app, but the following workshops are all in Delaware room, in the Delaware room, 404, 504, and 604, those workshops. 4.04, 5.04, and 6.04 in the Delaware room. 4.09 is in Roosevelt 5. 5.05 is in Maryland A-B, and 6.09 is also in Roosevelt 5. It's also up there, it says here. HUD issued a NOFA for the 811 vouchers, $150 million in new mainstream housing vouchers for non-elderly people with disabilities. This is a huge opportunity for all of us to get resources for people with disabilities, to get Section 8 vouchers for people with disabilities. Information about the application is on the screen. You should visit the Advocacy Hub. You heard from Chairman Clay, the importance of going to the Hill, the importance of your voices being heard. It's all the information that you need to make this easy is available at the Advocacy Hub. The meetings are set up. There's a bus to take you up there. You can also just take the subway. So information about Capitol Hill Day, the bus schedules, and other kinds of information about schedules and so forth and meetings are available at the Advocacy Hub. So please remember to go there. And also to visit those iPad stands at the registration area that have Alliance resources and tools that you can have access to. All right, that's the end of our plenary. Enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you at the workshops this afternoon.